Welcome. This video is showing and visualizing how you can configure Outlook sensors for Office Expert. So let's have a look on that. So what you see here is the bot I have currently up and running here on that particular computer. Behind that I have configured currently only one OneDrive simulation, so that's it what you see at the moment. And our aim is to configure now Outlook simulations. So for doing that, you just jump to bot configuration. You see that for that particular bot name, I have currently configured only this OneDrive sensor bot. And for our session here today is we configure Outlook Web. So I'm just selecting that one. Before I start configuring that stuff, let's switch over to some of the requirements which needs to be in place. So when we talk about bot requirements, then of course there are requirements coming from the authentication type. But also when you want to perform different simulations, especially when we talk about client simulations. So utilizing the Outlook client, you need to cover certain requirements. So for instance, Outlook client 2016 needs to be installed and available. Make sure that it's configured properly, that there is one user account dedicated or one profile dedicated, and that you disable and configure certain things inside of the Outlook client. So that's pretty important. Otherwise, if you don't follow those requirements, the Outlook client simulation will not really work successfully. We have two types of Outlook sensors available, so the Outlook Web and the Outlook client. For demonstration purpose, I will just use the web one because that's the simple one, without the need of having any client installation necessary. So what I have here is more or less similar page and configuration items like we have seen before with OneDrive. So you just give it a title, Outlook Web, whatever. You assign a schedule interval. And then there is the section free-time lookup names. And with free-time lookup names, it's meant that the simulation will perform a calendar lookup for any address you list down here. So just for simplicity reason, I just want to look up for instance, that particular address. So it's not really a mail lookup, it's a calendar lookup. So it checks if the calendar for that particular user can be looked up by the system. So usually you use this kind of configuration if you have a hybrid scenario where you have cloud users and on-prem users, and you need to make sure that the calendar lookup works between those two environments. So you can add here as many users as you like. We can do one thing here, for instance, invalid. So let's enter here one things like that as well. I have here basic authentication. I will assign it also to this particular bot. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you see a section called on-premises. And this on-premises section is only necessary if you want to configure an Outlook web sensor against an on-premises Exchange environment. In our case, it's not necessary because we want to perform it against the Exchange Online world. So I'm just saving that one. It appears here. And if you just want to create an Outlook client sensor, then more or less you have exactly the same settings, right? Except the on-premises world, because the on-premises world is not necessary because we use the profile which is already configured in the Outlook client. Okay? So we just hit the deploy button, just jump over to the bot. We see that we still have the OneDrive 10 meg, and we have now the Outlook Web as well. And in the next 45 seconds, he will trigger those two sensor types. So let's wait for that. And here we go. So the Outlook simulation was executed. Of course, he will give us here an error message saying that this invalid at whatever was not found in the directory. However, this whole simulation was successfully. So I have here a green icon. Just ignore the red one because I have some misconfiguration here in place for the OneDrive. But here we have successful information about the Exchange sensors. And if you open up the grid, then you basically see all the information. The total freedom lookups, you see 2 are configured and only 1 was failing. So this was the invalid one, just to visualize here that the other one was more or less working fine. So as said, this is how you can configure the Outlook stuff. You can always use the knowledge base to check what kind of steps are configured or simulated while using the Outlook web or client simulation. So you have here this kind of information available, and also what type of things you need to configure in here. So yeah, thanks for watching.